If you were to ask a group of people what the best Megami Tensei game is, it's a safe bet that there's going to be that one guy who says Jack Brothers. People go absolutely apeshit over this game. By mostly word of mouth, it's become something of a legend within the fanbase. It doesn't just get put at the top of tier lists, it gets a whole ass tier of its own. So what's the hype all about? Is this game actually worth playing, or is it all just one big joke? Well, the time has finally come. We're gonna take an in-depth look at the entirety of Jack Brothers, exploring every character, stage, and boss in an effort to get to the bottom of one of the Megami Tensei franchise's most interesting games. Kids, avert your eyes. This is about to be some heavy shit. Almost everything about Jack Brothers is an anomaly. Released in 1995 for the Virtual Boy, it was the first Megami Tensei game to come to the United States. The box art for the US release, quite frankly, is absolutely terrifying. I guess the cutesy Japanese box art just wasn't gonna fly here in the States. The game stars Jack Frost, Pyro Jack, and Jack the Ripper in a top-down maze game as they race against the clock to get home before the clock strikes midnight and they turn to dust. Each of these guys looks like they'd shank you and eat you for breakfast, like holy shit. Jack Frost is buff as hell. Guess you could say he's jacked. Now, if you're not familiar with the Virtual Boy, you're probably wondering, what the hell am I looking at? Well, essentially, the Virtual Boy was a failed Nintendo console whose whole gimmick was being able to see things in stereoscopic 3D. In order to keep the console affordable, it was manufactured with red LEDs on the inside of this headset, because I guess full color would have broken the bank. Some games, like Red Alarm for example, look terrible, but fortunately, Jack Brothers actually looks pretty damn good with nice sprites and world design. The 3D effect comes into play when you jump down to a lower floor and you can see it gradually coming closer to the screen. I've seen a lot of people refer to this as the best Virtual Boy game. Even though less than 20 games were made for the console in America, I guess that's kind of impressive. So you turn this shit on, press start, and it's time to pick a character. Our first choice is the classic, Jack Frost. He's got good mobility and can throw snowballs to beat enemies. His special attack freezes people so you can get a few free shots in without having to worry about dodging. Unfortunately, he's also the weakest of the bunch, so while he does have a quick ranged attack, you're going to be spending more time on stronger enemies and bosses. This might seem like the natural first pick, but if you're looking for a more balanced character, I'd suggest you pick our next character, Pyro Jack, or Jack Lantern. Yeah. If you played other Megami Tensei games, this is the first place you'll notice that some of the names were swapped for the American release. Was Pyro Jack too violent of a name for the US, like we're playing as an arsonist or something? Maybe they just couldn't pass up the chance to make a pun. Anyway, Jack Lantern acts a lot like Jack Frost, except his ranged fireballs are a bit stronger. His special attack also deals heavy damage to nearby enemies. The only thing you really sacrifice here is a bit of attack speed, as his fireballs shoot a bit slower and not as many can be on the screen at one time. Finally, we have Jack the Ripper, or Jack Skeleton. This is actually my personal favorite character. Jack Skeleton has no ranged attacks and can only use his knife. Sounds like a big disadvantage, right? Except it's actually really strong, so as long as you're able to quickly attack what's in front of you, most enemies won't stand a chance. His special move is basically a better version of Jack Lantern's, and usually outright kills everything on the screen while doing heavy damage to bosses. For our first playthrough, we're gonna use Jack Skeleton. Let's check it out. We get into a little intro cutscene that explains how Halloween is the one day fairies can come to the human world and goof off, at least until midnight when the portal between worlds closes. The Jack Brothers seem to have a habit of overdoing it, staying until 11 at night, giving them only an hour to get the hell out of there. If you get left behind, you lose your power and vanish forever. Luckily this time, Pixie's here to help us. She says that she knows a way home, but that it's a little dangerous. So, with Pixie and whatever Jack you've chosen, the adventure of a lifetime begins. The first world we're off to is the Forest of Fairies. You drop in and Pixie gives you a little tutorial. We gotta collect keys, fight enemies, and drop down to the next floor. Easy enough. You might even be lucky enough to find a power up here on this first floor, like these orbs that'll take some hits for you. As you continue on, Pixie introduces you to more enemies, like the goblin here that drops bombs. The main idea of playing Jack Bros is efficiency. The The entire game is on a time limit, and rather than having a health bar, if you get hit, you lose time. Smaller enemies tend to take off 5 or 10 seconds, but bosses can take off as much as 30. By relying on your map in the bottom right, you want to navigate towards keys and then the exit as quickly as possible while also exploring as much of the map as you can. Tucked away in corners, you might find power-ups that add more time to your clock, extra casts of your special attack, or invincibility potions that let you run fast as shit and destroy everything in your path. It can pay off to make a detour and sacrifice some precious seconds, but only if you're getting something good out of it. Depending on how well you're doing at dodging enemy attacks and finding keys, you might breeze through the game with more than enough time to search levels completely, but I think no matter who you are, there's going to be at least one stage that takes you off guard, turning the game into an intense rush to the finish. It can honestly get pretty addicting, and while early stages such as this are in fact very easy, the last couple ramp up the challenge significantly, especially with the bosses. So the first world goes by fast and you reach the boss. It's Lamia, and really, she just swings around and tosses out 3 projectiles every so often. If you're using a projectile attack yourself, just hang back and blast her until she goes down. With Jack's skeleton, basically, you just want to get close, poke her, then back off before she attacks. If you have special attacks left over, those are going to bring her down pretty quickly too. With the first stage down, we get a password. The game's pretty short and can be completed in less than an hour, so there's no save feature. Luckily, these passwords are very short, so they aren't a pain to remember or input later. After that, it's on to the Grim Reaper's Cavern. Here, Pixie introduces us to Tomcat, or Nekomata. Tomcat is a quicker enemy, but not very tough, so just be sure to avoid the rush attack it can do. Then, on the next floor, Pixie introduces us to Jack Traps. These are just spikes, don't step on them. Pretty self-explanatory. To be honest, Pixie's role as a guide is pretty funny at first because she explains literally everything, but it doesn't take long to get kinda old. These tutorial messages flash at the start of almost every floor for quite a while. That means every time you play through the game, you gotta read these all over again. There's no way to disable them. Kind of a small nitpick, but since the game's so short, well, these can be pretty repetitive. We also meet Elf, who's kind of a pain in the ass since she shoots at you with arrows. Usually they're out of sight at first, so it's inevitable that you're gonna eat a few arrows here and there. Another kind of puzzle we find are these floors where you gotta push boulders around to clear a path. Kinda reminds me of that Puzzle Boy minigame from Nocturne. These rock puzzles seem like they might be a huge time sink, but they're never really that bad. When you reach the boss, it's Sinister Scar, this big ass skull dude. Pretty freaky. Well, he's not really hard, but it's a step up from Lamia, so be sure you're showing up here with a lot of time in case he hits you. One hit from his eye tentacle shit takes away 20 seconds, so don't take too many of those or you're gonna have to redo the stage. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with redoing a stage if you need to, because if a boss is giving you a hard time, mastering the levels before it and arriving with a bigger timer can give you a lot more breathing room. Just something to keep in mind. So, Scar goes down and it's on to the Temple of Nightmare. Right away, you see these new traps called Paradise. Walk between them and they smash you. These are like the bane of my existence, not so much in this dungeon, but later on, because the game decides to get pretty fucking insane with the placement of some of them. You'll see how later. We also soon meet Mystic Morgan, this little wizard dickhead that appears for half a second, shoots something at you, then vanishes. He always seems to appear in the worst possible spot, like in the middle of a corridor you need to go down or behind a rock you're trying to push. He's a huge nuisance. Later on, you run into the knight Furin. This guy can't be attacked from the front, so if you get stuck in a hallway with him, he'll go to town on your ass. Just lure him into a bigger room and hit him in the back or sides. Arguably, the most important enemy you meet is Poltergeist. Anytime you see these things, make it your priority to stop and kick its ass. They always drop huge time bonuses, and it's really worth your time to stop and chase them down. They always outrun you, so you need to force them into a dead end or use one of your special moves. The bonuses are typically in the range of 50 extra seconds, which is a godsend no matter how much time you're working with. The boss of this stage is Vampire. You drop down to his floor, and whoo shit, it's going crazy. I feel like if you're playing this on a real Virtual Boy, it might make you puke your guts out. You gotta try and stand on the right part of the floor, or else you're just gonna get shoved right into the boss. If you're a projectile character, this is a bad thing, but for Jack's skeleton, well, you kinda have to get close anyway. To be honest, I found it best to just show up here with a lot of extra time and ram myself up his ass, dodging be damned. If you got special attacks, again, use them, it makes you go by a lot faster. Vampire is, in my opinion, the last boss that's sorta easy, so get ready, because from here on, the game decides to ramp it up a bit. The next stage is the Dragon's Belly. Of fucking course, it's never a Megami Tensei game without the stomach level. Naturally, they didn't have to worry about coloring this one red, since the entire game is red. So you're walking around in Dragon Guts, and damn, the song in this level is great. Yeah, that reminds me, this game is a kick-ass soundtrack. You probably already noticed that. There are no bad songs in this game, I swear, they perfectly suit it and never get repetitive. It actually kinda reminds me of music from a Kirby game. Usually, the stomach level is the worst one in the game, but Jack Brothers gets a pass because this one is quite good. As I said, the challenge here does get a bit higher. Sometimes you'll drop into a room, and depending on what exit you choose, you might have just shat yourself into a corner. Like right here, Pixie says there may be enemies standing right next to you, as a knight stands directly behind me, ready to shove his sword up my skeletal ass. You also get introduced to these laser traps. Break them from behind and you'll almost definitely get zapped by another one, taking off a decent bit of your time. Always destroy these from the side. You might want to try to push rocks in front of them to block the laser. There are also dark zones in this dungeon. In a first-person Megami Tensei game, these suck, but they really aren't bad at all in this game. They're never very big, and I feel like the game designers could have made these a lot more annoying, but thankfully they chose not to. A new enemy type is the Skelipede, who could only be attacked from the front. There's also Luminous Lex, who's basically a laser trap that moves around. He can't be attacked at all, so don't even bother. Finally, there are Fire Breathers, these statues that spit fire. Again, they can't be killed, so just dodge and move on. That's kinda like a recurring theme of this game. Enemies you can only hit from the front, back, side. It might seem kinda hard to memorize all the rules, but it doesn't take long to get the hang of it. The biggest challenge, really, is just discovering the best route through a level, and then deciding what enemies are worth fighting and which are worth avoiding. The boss at this stage is Spider Orb. He's kinda tough. You can only hit his eye to deal damage, and a lot of the time he has it covered up. His attacks hit pretty hard, and he's got a stun move that can freeze you for what feels like 3 hours. It's some bad shit. If you don't have special attacks to spam on this guy, you're gonna want a lot of time and a lot of patience. Now, patience is actually one of your most useful tools on the bosses. In a game with a time limit and so much to do, it seems natural to move quickly, which is normally true, but on bosses, you really want to slow down a bit. Take a second, figure out his move pattern, and strike carefully, or you're just gonna get hit and lose a lot of time anyway. When you beat him, it's on to the Mecha Fortress. This place is big, you got a lot of ground to cover. At this point, you've seen a lot of the game's enemies and traps, so it's up to you to just make it through fast enough. There are some new enemies like Angel, who throws a ball and chain at you, but she only appears like twice in the whole game, so she's not a big obstacle at all. On one of the floors, Pixie actually stops you and lets you know that she has nothing to say, so she's gonna stop talking for a while. Let's fucking go, man, thank God! It's time to crack some skulls and get shit done. The next few floors are just more puzzles. It can feel tempting to get kinda relaxed and maybe slow down a bit, but keep up your pace, because the boss hits hard, and you've got a lot of floors to get through. Later, Pixie does come back and introduces us to Cyclops, who is without a doubt the worst enemy in the game. This guy takes a lot of hits, does a lot of damage, and every few seconds he stomps the ground and freezes you. In a game where mobility is your biggest priority, your best asset, being frozen feels like it lasts forever. On one hand, you can prioritize defeating them, but you might get hit and lose out on a lot of time. I like to try and just rush the level dodging them, but yeah, being frozen sucks, and it can get you into a lot of trouble if they're walking around nearby. I died a few times around this point, a couple times because of the Cyclops, and at least once from being stuck on a puzzle. Just keep trying, it gets easier each attempt. Eventually, you make it to the boss, Whiburn. So the whole floor here is a spike trap, which can be really hard to focus on dodging in the heat of the moment. The boss himself is also breathing fire, which deals heavy damage. The strategy is basically the same as the other bosses, either keep your distance and dodge, or poke him and then back away, rinse and repeat. The difficulty just comes in the amount of shit you need to dodge. Sometimes I just run around like an absolute maniac, and it kinda works. Do your best and he'll go down, but you might need to practice that spike floor a bit. That's where it's gonna get you. Alright, so next up, the final stage, the Crystal Palace. Yup, we're already there. Let's give it a shot. To be honest, at this point I could do this dungeon in my sleep. I played through it probably 6 or 7 times. This is where the game gets tricky with its spike traps, placing them in odd angles and having hallways you need to access directly in the path of a trap. It's all about manipulating the traps properly to move and quickly running in behind it before it resets. You got floors with a shitload of lasers, floors with a lot of enemies, and of course, more Cyclops enemies. There is one floor with like 5 poltergeists. Be sure you get all of them for a huge time bonus. You're gonna need this for the final boss. The last normal floor before the boss is a warp maze. I'd say show up here with at least 350 seconds to spare. The boss has a big health bar, and unless you're the master at dodging, you are definitely going to be taking a lot of hits. Overall, the Crystal Palace is exactly what you'd expect. It's everything we've seen in the game so far, but with the intensity turned way up. So drop down and it's the last boss, Belzoff, or rather, Beelzebub. First, you face off against his human form. It doesn't look hard, right? You got this paradise trap going up and down the screen, and besides that, it's just a guy shooting 3 projectiles. But I don't know, I found this to be deceivingly hard. First of all, like the previous boss, you have to be paying attention to this trap at the same time as the boss, so your attention's divided a bit. It just took me a long time to get the feel for this trap. You have to bait it into activating and then swing in front of it, and just get into a rhythm of doing that over and over and over. The first form isn't so bad with a smaller health bar, but then he transforms into a big-ass fly with a double-stacked health bar. Shit. Well, the gimmick stays the same, except he shoots flies from his mouth and a lot more projectiles. All I can say is just take your time and master that trap on the side. Once you figured out the spikes, the boss is basically a joke. I'd honestly consider the Paradise Trap to be the true final boss of the game, because other than spit things out and move around, well, Beelzebub ain't shit. Finally, he goes down, and Jack Skeleton is hauling ass out of there towards the portal as monsters chase him. He jumps through and leaves all the enemies behind, and Mystic Morgan says that it's because of young people that all of this happened in the first place. Figures he's an old fart beneath that mask. My favorite part of this ending is when the Furin Knight says very politely, "Please retract that statement," like he's personally offended that Morgan hates the modern youth. Belzoff also appears and tries to hype them up, saying that they'll win next time. And that's the game. At least one route of it. For people that have seen the endings before, you might notice that something's missing in the one I'm showing. The true ending features special character art with the credits, an extra little cutscene of all the game's characters, and a secret password for the game's hard mode. To get this stuff, you have to beat the game with 3 special attack stars remaining in your inventory. I didn't know that, so naturally, I blew through those things to beat the final boss easier. Jack Brothers doesn't have any room for casuals apparently, so if you want the real ending, you can't fuck around. Of course, the video wouldn't be complete if I didn't show you all that stuff and the other characters' endings, so before we recap everything, let's see what happens for the other 2. First up, we'll do Jack Frost. In my opinion, the hardest character to beat the game as. For the final boss, you really need to get that pattern down. It's way more important to be good at the game as Jack Frost than as Jack Skeleton. Like I said, your attacks are a lot weaker, so it's all about staying alive as long as possible in order to wear down the enemy's health. Your time is a lot more valuable here. His special attack is also much less effective, so you won't be as tempted to use it on the final boss. Besides the ending cutscene, the entire game's the exact same, so there aren't any extra puzzles or anything to worry about. Jack Frost's ending has him meeting a group of fairies at the portal, and he thanks them for waiting up on him. They were so worried about him that they try to tackle his ass, but Jack jumps like 20 feet in the air and goes into the portal. The fairy princess thanks Pixie for her help, and they seem to agree that even though this happens every year, it's almost like a tradition for them and the monsters. Then the credits roll, and shit, I did it again. I know, I literally just said that the special attack for Jack Frost wasn't very useful on the final boss, but hey, a man forgets sometimes. So, I still didn't get the true ending. Third time's the charm. Next up, let's check out Jack Lantern's ending. He's actually a lot of fun to play as, and like I mentioned at the beginning, he feels the most balanced. He's probably the best to play against the final boss with, especially because you got that mix of power and speed, so I definitely recommend him for at least one playthrough. At this point, I started to get good at the final boss, so it became a lot more entertaining to be able to speed through the entire game in one go. For the ending, Jack-O-Lantern runs up to the portal and the princess isn't there. Pixie's gone too. Then suddenly the princess pops out, and when Jack asks where Pixie went, she acts kind of evasive about it. Jack notes that she sounds like someone else he knows, then the game ends. The hell? I don't really get it, so if someone knows what the joke there was, let me know in the comments. But yeah, this time I did get the extra cutscene with the game's various monsters, and also some really cool art to look at. Nice. So, with all 3 characters out of the way, you'd think that's it. But no, there's actually one more character. Yeah, it's Pixie herself. Oh shit. So to unlock Pixie, first you gotta input the password to activate hard mode that you get with the true ending. Turn that shit on and the title screen displays a subtitle for super players. Hell yeah. Hard mode actually changes a lot of stuff too. It adds a lot more enemies, the textures of each level and some of the traps are different, and the boss music also changes. Overall, it's still the same game and the bosses don't feel much harder, so really it's just a fun little bonus thing to run through. By now, you should be decent at the game enough that if you finished it, this won't be much of a sweat for you. Give it a shot if you can't get enough of that sweet Jack action. Beat the game on hard mode, and finally, you get the password to play as Pixie. Slap that shit on, and holy shit, there she is. Pixie is pretty damn overpowered. She's basically like the best attributes of each Jack combined into one character. She's very fast, hits hard, and her special move is invincibility. Damn. It's a lot of fun to just mess around and play through the game as her, so be sure you check it out, even if you just Google the password to use her. Funnily enough, since you are Pixie, she doesn't give those tutorial messages anymore, so that's another plus. Now you might be wondering, what's her ending like? Well, I played through the game again, and I'm here to tell you that jack fucking shit happens. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. She literally has no ending. I was hoping there'd be some kind of crazy bonus boss or some kind of ending where she ascends to godhood, but nah, nothing like that. Still, she's a fun character, and hey, that's what it's all about. Well, that's every character finished up. Jack Brothers is really a fun game for what it is, and it would benefit a lot from some kind of re-release. You can tell a lot of effort went into making a goofy little world for the series mascots, and it would be great to see it in full color. Is it the best Mega 10 title? Well, realistically no, but it's a hell of a good game, and if you're interested, there's really no reason not to try it out. The game's short and sweet, and it's easy to set up in an emulator. Don't try to buy a real copy though, unless you're a big collector, because the US version is worth more than I am. I'd give this game an easy B or A tier, probably A just because it's got great music and it's a real standout for the Virtual Boy. I think a lot of people asked me to review this game as a joke, and I kinda went into it expecting not that much, but I was surprised at how much fun I had by the end, so yeah, be sure to play it for yourself. Hope you guys liked the video, and be sure to let me know what you think of the game in the comments below. This was the Jack Brothers experience, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.